Hello, everyone. My name is Prashant Gami. First of all, I would like to apologize for yesterday's fiasco. There was a little bit confusion in the time zone, and it just caused a massive problem. But I'm so glad you guys have joined again. So thank you so much for that. Now, I don't know how many of you joined our previous webinar, which was about like the 5 mistakes that founders make before they actually write the code. And in that webinar, what we covered is these 5 mistakes that you need to make sure you fix it before you actually start building something. It's like designing or architecting something. Uh, if you want to know a little bit more about it, you can refer the previous webinar, but I'm just going to recap quickly because I think it's a strong foundation going into today's webinar. So the 5 steps that we discussed in previous webinar is that before you start building anything in your business, you should be defining the problem that your business is solving. Not your solution, not the product, but what is the business problem? What is the problem that you are solving for your users? Clearly articulate the problem, measure the value to the user for solving that problem, urgency, how quickly they want the solution, are they willing to pay for it, and do they actually have an intention to solve their problem? Because many of the problem, they do exist, but they exist for a reason, because by solving them you might create a side effect which is not desirable, and that's why a lot of the solutions are not really relevant. Do your market research, and that means hypothesizing is fine, but if you found a problem that actually matters, that needs solving, and people actually want the solution, they're happy to pay for it, there should be alternate solutions that exist. And it might not be as sophisticated as what you are trying to do, but it might still be a workaround. It might be something they're doing right now to handle that problem or whatever. So do your market research, do your competition analysis, check how it is working at the moment, and make sure that you have very clear idea of the market before you enter. And to do that, don't just rely on the Google search or desk analysis. Go and talk to real customers. Get some measurable feedback. Talk to them, ask them questions not about your solutions or whether you will use these features, but about the problem. That are you facing this problem? What are you doing to solve this problem? If this problem is solved, what is the value to you? What will you how it will change what you are currently facing? So talk about problem, not the solution, but the problem itself. And measure the actions, not the compliments. This is very important, because a lot of the time when you ask people, hey, if I create something like this, will you use it? They're more likely to say yes, but they will never actually end up buying that. So to actually measure the intent, what you can do is you can create fake door, you can create landing page, you can create expression of interest, you can even take pre-orders if that is something you can do. So those things will allow you to validate your problem, but also identify who are the early adopters, who will be your beta users or initial user base. And then as we said, measure actions and validate. Keep track of what you need to deliver, how quickly you need to deliver, what have you promised, what are the success criteria that looks like if you do it correctly, and that should include the financial outcome. If the business does not have outlook of what its financial milestones are, then you are very easy to sway into many problems, and which is what we will be talking about today. So once you have done all that, you're now ready to build. So where do you go from there? And that's where we are coming. So let's start with the mistakes that people do. So if you're currently building something, or you have done previous 5 steps, you think you understand the market, opportunity, the cost and the benefit of doing that, and you have a team that can actually execute, but you don't know how to start building, or you are building and you are halfway through and suddenly it feels like I don't know if whatever I'm building will be enough. Do I need to build more, or do I need to build something different, or AI is changing the game, or whatever you are feeling, or you feel like that you have finished the build, but you're not able to get traction. You are struggling to actually make the market buy that product, or you have small user base, you're not able to scale up. These are probably one of the 5 mistakes that you have done, and it's okay. Like there's not end of the road. You can always solve them. So let's go through what are those 5 mistakes. One, building a product, not an MVP. So MVP, minimum viable product. Now, textbook definition of MVP is that what is the minimum set of features that your product need to have for customers before the customers are willing to pay for the product. What that means is that yes, if your product is built completely as you envisioned in the end version of that, great, obviously people will buy that. But do you need to build all of that before someone buys? And this question, as simple as it seems, most of the founders are biased towards this particular thing. They think that they have to complete everything before someone is ready to buy. It's not good enough. All right, we get the imposter syndrome. But if you drill down further, you will find that what you actually need to build first is not the entire thing. It might be part of the product or subset of the product that can still be sellable. And that's what MVP is, the minimum version of your product. All right. And second obvious that goes from that, feature overload. I always love giving this example of mail merge. Now I don't know how many of you actually know mail merge. So in Word, MS Word, there's a feature called mail merge, which basically allows you to put the placeholders, and these placeholders can be filled by a table or something. So I think about like you are sending out a notice to intended users. You can put the first name, last name as a placeholder, then give a list of users, and it will create like, letters for all the users. Now, in today's world, if you look at Word, how many times you have actually used mail merge? Probably most of us never used it, or half of us don't even know what a mail merge is. But this feature was shipped on the first version of Microsoft Office Word. If Word was developed today, that feature will never make it to the product in version 1. So the thing is, thinking about product has changed. The way we are adding features into the product for users to buy has changed, and we need to adapt that, learn from that, and then do the lean and agile development rather than building everything at once and then waiting for users to actually pay for everything upfront, right? So that's another thing to look after. Launching without launch strategy. What that means is you build the product, and a lot of us believe that if you build a great product, people will come. Not necessarily true, because if your product is great but nobody knows about it, nobody knows the benefit of your product, then you might not even have a market. If you look at the history of like which products did well, they were not the best product technically, functionality wise, quality wise, they were not the best product. Facebook is a classic example. When Facebook was introduced, MySpace and Orkut were killing the market. All right, they had the largest share of market, and they were far better product than what Facebook was. Still, Facebook was not only able to capture the market, but literally wipe out both of those platforms. So it's not always the platform that or the product quality that determines how successful your business will be. Of course, it is important. Facebook today is a very different technical product than what it started with, but it did not start there. The first version of Facebook was a shit show in a classic case. All right, but the way it worked is water flows downwards. It introduced in Harvard. People wanted to mingle with people at Harvard, and then it just created the ripple effect, and that's how it got popular. So your launch strategy, your marketing, how you going to actually penetrate the market, how you going to expand on that, what is the roadmap, not only the first launch but subsequent launches, is important, and you need that before you finish building the product. All right. Wrong technology choices for the stage. What does that mean? We are engineers, at least I am, and many of us are. We love to over engineer. We romanticize with the complexity, which is not always the good thing. Only create something complex if it needs to be. If you are doing a genome therapy, you are creating a new gene, yes, it needs to be complex. There's no other side of that. But if you are building a SaaS product, many of the time the product can be as simple as possible. You can go with the default technology choices like Node.js or Java or .NET or something. Just put like the native or Flutter development. Like just do the basic choices that actually works. Why that matters is because if you need to replace a development team or you need to find another developer, it will be far easier to find in the technologies that are popular than the technologies that are very complex, niche, but they are built for a very specific purpose. So don't try to create complex solution. And the final mistake that I want to talk about is no feedback loop after the launch. You launch the product, you got the user, you have no idea what they are doing. You have no idea if your product is crashing. You have no idea what features are being used, how much they are being used, or what is actually popular. What do people struggle with? And all that data tells you what to build next. If you do not have analytics, notifications, crash reporting, all these listening mechanism, feedback mechanism built into the app, you are not talking to the initial users, then you are running in a blind spot. And today we're going to talk about how to avoid all these mistakes. So, how to scope your MVP? Let's go through the first one. So, this is basically not building the entire product, but only building what is actually required. So, what is the smallest? And I want to focus and really emphasize on the easiest problem that you can solve for your customer that they are happy to pay for. It might not even be your complete product. It might even be something else that you only encountered during the talking to the customers. All right. What is the problem that is the easiest one to solve and they're happy to pay for it? If you can identify that within the product domain that you are doing, that's your first win, because that gives you a simplest, smallest scope to generate money. And a business that starts generating money as early as possible is always more successful because it got a runway, it got the traction, it is start building customer, it has the product that can turn into many things. And we keep hearing stories, we keep looking at memes that Netflix started as a CD company. Nokia was actually a sickle company. So they all pivoted over the time. Give me one sec. So what you build as your first product doesn't necessarily mean to be your final product. You can always pivot. But finding that one problem that that's the easiest to solve is a win. So if you have a product definition or a problem that you identified and validated, have you broken that down into multiple problems? And in the example I give, I'll show you what that means. All right. So your overall problem might be that you're going to build a CRM or some sort of system for business. But is there a subset of that problem? Have you broken down that what are the smaller problems? All right. And then you can pick one of those problems. So what is the minimum subset that you can identify and solve? And does your pricing strategy match your stage rollout? So given that you're going to build a subset of your product, you might not want to charge the full rate. You might want to charge for what you are building and selling in the first version. The price may change when you do the second version, third version, and subsequent. And you can release multiple products in the same suite. Like Microsoft Office is a classic example. It has Word, PowerPoint, Excel, all of that. So you can buy one or the whole suite and so on. So just charge for what you are selling at the moment, and your pricing strategy should match that. Okay, how that needs to change. Do I need to revolt the existing or early adopters and give them some discount when they buy the second version for a while or something? All right. And just be very clear what will sell now. Typical example is a Panadol versus vitamin sell. Are you selling vitamin or are you selling Panadol? If someone has a headache, you are selling Panadol, it will sell. But if you are selling vitamin, you need to sell the dream, you need to sell the future, you need to sell the better version of themselves that they cannot see at the moment but will come in the future. So this will also determine your sales strategy. So let's go through an example. And as I was saying, CRM is a very good example. So overall problem statement that you identified is, and this is something we also did in the previous webinar, it's the same statement. Fitness coaches with a team of fewer than 5 use multiple platforms to serve their customers, creating a fragmented user experience with a high cost of manual management. Now that's an overall business problem that we want to solve. So we want to create CRM for small businesses, coaches, particularly fitness coaches or diet coaches, and it needs to have customer management, tracking and analytics. It needs to have payment and subscription. It needs to have customer management. It needs to give classes through that. So there are multiple features. But when you start talking to them and then you identify that what the main problem they are currently facing is that, so the MVP problem statement derived from that overall product is currently the subscription and the payment management is fragmented, requiring staff to manually track, manage payment, access various systems, and chase the customers to get the payment, store the payment method, charge them. There's too much going on, right? So what you can do is, rather than building the whole CRM to start with, you can build the payment and subscription platform. So their payment and subscription is automated. They have a button on their website that says subscribe now. It has plan listed over there that they can manage the pricing, the features of the plan. They can allow self sign up. You can integrate payment gateway that automatically takes the payment, that sends the reminder if the payment fails or the card is about to expire. All the notification can go to customers as well as admin when something needs attention, and it can keep the record, connect with your accounting system. Now see, by limiting the problem or by creating a subset of the problem, you can see that not only you reduce the timeline, but you are able to deliver far more detailed and intelligent solution for a subset of the problem, and you are more likely to sell that compared to a half-baked solution with everything barely working and has a lot of gaps. So once you do that, the next version might build on top of that the customer management. Next module might come which will get promotion and resources. Next module might bring like operations and actual classes and things like that, or scheduling. So build iteratively, and that way you can basically sell in multiple iteration. So how do you prioritize? Because this is a very easy example, because you identified the problem and it was easy to say, okay, yeah, the business says payment is the biggest problem because everybody loves chasing money. It was easy to identify, but how do you actually prioritize the feature when everything feels like, oh, this is important, this is important? Okay, so break down problem into multiple smaller problems. I'll give you an example. So we just finished building one product which is an AI business in dementia care. Now it has multiple opportunities there. One, it provides an integrated support for managing the behavior issues of dementia. So there's a chatbot component or a asking component which allows user to ask and then get help in the moment. The other component is a compliance component where they have to create a behavior management plan. The third component is basically they use something called cognitive stimulation therapy, which is used more like an exercise to their brain. All right. There's another opportunity which is a marketplace for all the dementia consultant and experts for the carers as well as the person with dementia. There's also a teaching aspect and the training aspect of that. So one product has a lot of features, but what is the most important thing? And by breaking down those problems, we can go and talk to customers and do the interview and say, all right, how big is this problem? How big is this problem? Like how urgent this problem is. All right. And they might say everything is urgent, but say, all right, if I give you a product with this, with just the chatbot and not the other component, will it work? And they might say, yeah, that works. All right. And then you can say, all right, so what is the biggest and easiest opportunity? You build that and you can deliver just that part of the system. And then you can build subsequent part later. So each feature that you build, you need to directly associate with the problem that you are solving. And that means your problem needs to be broken down. Each feature need to be associated with the problem that you are solving. And then only keep the feature that are essential to sell. That means if I need a chatbot, what is the blocker? So the blocker, you can say that integration with their existing system is a blocker. But if I look at it, I'm like, no, I can manually take the data, I can upload it in my database. Yes, it will require some manual work, but for 100 patients to start with, I can do it manually. I can bear that cost, I can learn my lesson and then automate when I go to 10th facility rather than first facility. So I'm not going to bring that. It's not my blocker to sell. I'm only going to focus on the quality of the recommendation or the strategy that the product is giving. And that's my key blocker to selling. If the quality of the answers are not good enough or generic, that's a blocker to sell. Everything else is good to have. So you should always do the Moscow analysis: must, should, could, would, into your features, and only keep what is must. Everything else is version 2, right? Can you remove a feature without losing the ability to sell? So this determines if it is a must feature. If you take out that feature that nobody will buy, then that feature need to be in version 1. Everything else can postpone. All right. And name each version of your product. I'll give you a very good example of that. So let's say you decided you want to build a car. All right. Now, in classic method, when Henry Ford did that, he did something like this. He first created the axle and the wheels. Then he basically put the engine around it, body around it, and then he created the car. Now, it's much harder. If you have to do something like that today, this is more agile approach. What that means is the problem, we are not saying it's a car that is like the problem, that people want car. That's not the problem statement. Problem statement is it takes too long for people to travel from A to B. So the speed and the time is the problem. So you can solve that problem in multiple ways. So your first version might not be the car, but because you build the wheel and the axle and the alignment, you can build a skateboard, which is ready in 1 week. You can start selling. Okay, now skateboards are hard because the learning curve is very steep and not everyone can skate. Let's put a handle on that and call it a scooter. We got more adaptability, but it's still not perfect. So it still doesn't go as fast. So let's convert that into bicycle. So now it goes faster than the scooter. More people can ride it. It's a bit more ergonomic and solves the problem. Now, but it's not fast enough. So let's put the engine on that and let's call it motorcycle. And now you got better product, you got better speed, you got more traction, and it goes. And then eventually that will turn into a car. So the difference between this and this is here, to be able to make money, you have to go all the way to version 4. Versus here, you might not make as much money as the car would. You will not sell as much as car would. Customers are still unhappy. They might be moderately happy with this, but they will only start getting happy when you have a engine driven vehicle. But you still are making sell. Your business is still progressing, and that still is a progress. All right. So don't always focus that it has to be perfect before I start selling. Let's go to the next. problem.
One second, Prashant.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. This is for all the attendees. If you guys have any questions, please
Yeah,
jot it
please.
down. We have a Q&A session at the end of it.
And if you want to pause in between and raise your hand or ask questions, please feel free. It's a very small audience, more than happy to take break and take questions in between. You don't need to wait at the end, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So how to pick the right technology for your stage? So right technology is a very, very subjective question. There's no right answer for everything. One size does not fit all. So what you need to do is basically determine what you are trying to achieve. And the first concept we all need to be clear about is that technology is a tool. It's not the goal. It's the tool that you use to achieve the goal. Now, the goal, as we saw in the other example, is actually the speed of transport, right? And the technology is the wheel that you are using, the engine you are using, the problem that you are solving is basically one might be speed, second might be skill required to actually drive it, third might be the comfort that it provides, fourth might be the level of speed and the benefit that it provides. So what is the technology required? The first one only requires wheel, the second one requires a handle, the third one requires pedal, the fourth one requires an engine, and the fifth version actually requires a much more sophisticated technology to drive. All right, so your technology will evolve and the need will evolve as you go along. So don't be that okay. And if you many of you, if you have IT background, you would understand this. Like if you have a CTO or an advisor who comes from an enterprise background and never worked in a startup, he will always put structure as a base. Now, structure is required, but it does not require a complexity of an enterprise. Why? Because your initial user base is not going to be that big. Your servers doesn't need to be that big. The architecture doesn't need to be that complex to start with. It can start with a monolith and then turn into microservice based architecture. It does not have to be like that on day one. But the structure of your code need to be clear enough so that when you try to turn this monolith into a microservice, it's easy to do that. All right, so that understanding that is very, very important. That complexity is only added when it is required, not early on, not over engineering. So the goal is actually user experience. As I said in my previous example, quality of the answer that determines the user experience. If the quality is not good, the user experience is deteriorated, the product quality is deteriorated, and that for the business success is deteriorated. So what you are actually aiming for is the utmost user experience for the one feature or a subset of feature that you are currently developing, not for everything. And do not over engineer, as we keep saying, and go with the flow unless otherwise. What that means is, if there are technologies that are working at the moment, 80% of the market is using them, go with them unless you have a very good reason for using something very specific or very specialist technology. All right, it always works out better, because when you need to change your plan, change your development, all that will become like easy, because it's easy to find replacement talent, is easy to switch to someone else, or change to some other technology. The tooling, the ecosystem is available for most of the common technology. So it's not just about the technology, but everything surrounding the technology as well, right? And as I mentioned, don't build startups like enterprises. uh, don't overcomplicate. You will need structure, but that structure does not need to be complex. And launch plan. So how do you derive the launch plan? How do you create the launch plan? So first, be clear, what is the first version I'm launching? What is my first product? What is my MVP? What is the name of it? What is the problem it is solving? What is the solution? What are the benefits? Who are the customers who are affected by that one particular problem that I'm solving right now? So previous example of CRM versus payment. Now, if I have a team of coaches, then there's someone who is actually doing the training, there's someone who is doing the bookkeeping, someone who is looking after the communication, and then there is owner. Now if you look at the those five personas in the business, the people who will prioritize the payment and the subscription will be the owner and the bookkeeper. Everybody else will say, no, 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 we need classes, we need this. But that's not a blocker. So your subset of customer also becomes smaller when you have a subset of problem that you are solving. So you need to identify who are the ideal customer, even within the organization or within the ecosystem, are actual buyers for version 1. And what is the success criteria for version 1? So a success for a payment portal is not same as success for the overall CRM, right? Same with success of how many skateboards you will sell cannot be compared with a car, because car is a completely different buy, completely different market, completely different segment. So what you are building in version 1, how will you call it a success? Number of users, number of subscribers, number of traction, or there's a hypothesis that you need to prove right. It might not even generate any how do you say, the profit, but you will still identify that yes, this, if this problem is solved, people are happy to buy. Now we need to check the pricing. So in the second version, you can play with the pricing and then get more profitable. So what is the success criteria for version 1? You need to be clear about that. Third, listen. How will you listen? How will you know the performance of your product? Do you have analytics built in? Do you have the data points built into the product that will tell you which features are being used, how they are being used? Are they too difficult to use? Are people using it over and over? All right. So take the example of Instagram. Now, when Instagram first came, it had multiple type of features. Stories were added later, but the feed had like the text post, the video post, the image post, and all that. Now we all know that Facebook versus Instagram, the best feature that actually worked in Instagram are the Instagram filters. It got really popular for image because of the filters. People were not interested in content. Nobody was reading what the caption was in many cases, right? They were only looking at the photos, and if the photos had good feeling, it kept going. It only became the real platform after TikTok came. And that was also biased decision. Instagram always had this split persona. Do we stay the image platform? Do we integrate, become the real platform? Do we become both? And it struggled a lot to actually find the niche that actually works for them, right? So you need to understand, but it was only able to do that when it was listening to the data. If it went through intuition, Facebook was the challenger, and the Facebook experience was very different and very comprehensive compared to Instagram. But Instagram was still more popular and is getting more and more popularity in the new generation. So I just determine the data points, make sure you are listening to them, that tells you what is actually working for users, and then your decisions should be based on that data. You need to take risk, but every risk needs to be calculated, measured, and then either kept going or marked as a failure and then retracted. So do you have a mechanism place for production issue? So if you are facing crash, if people are not able to log in, if they are the forgot password is not working, if something is breaking in the production, do you have the data point that tells you before customers go to common forums and start complaining, or go to app store and start complaining about your app? What kind of marketing and sales do you need? Influencer marketing, expert marketing, knowledge. There are a lot of, particularly with AI, there are platforms coming which people have never used before. So a lot of the marketing techniques today in the product world are actually education. Educating people how this will benefit them is also a type of marketing. So what is the marketing that will work for your product, your business? You need to be clear about that. And have you actually budgeted for worst case scenario? Let's say you projected that, okay, if I do this, I'm going to get 10,000 users in first quarter, 100,000 in a year, and so on. But what if you don't? What if you only get 1,000 users in 1 year time? Have you calculated that can your business run at least for 3 years, right? 3 to 5 years is the minimum period that you need to pivot, to change the direction, to fix what you found in the production, to solve the problem, and until you become profitable and all that. We all know the story of like the overnight success takes at least 5 to 10 years. What that means is that you will fail number of times, and the very famous story is Angry Bird. Angry Bird was actually the 12th game that review company developed, and it was the last game before the company was going bankrupt. And that's when it became the overnight success. So when it became the app of the year, they got invited it the conference, and these guys asked, how do you feel about your overnight success? And it was like 12-year long, because they were doing it for 12 years until they found that one thing that actually works. So have you actually considered that you might have to keep lingering and experimenting until it becomes a success, and you need to budget for that, and you have to prepare for that as well, right? And what is the ideal time frame that the user need to use your product before they actually get used to using your product, right? And every product has this different. How long did you have to use Gmail before you got used to it, versus how long do you have to use ChatGPT before you got used to it, versus how many time did you have to go to gym before you got used to going to gym? They are all different products, they all require different timing, and they all require and that's why gyms have contracts and the lock-in period, versus ChatGPT don't, right? Because they don't need to, versus gym wants to lock you in for a year at least, so that you get used to coming. All right, you need to build the habit of actually going every time. And if whatever hypothesis you did, if they don't work, what is your plan B? Do you need to change the feature? Do you need to solve a different problem? Do you need to change the pricing? Do you need to change the team? There might be a lot of things. So think about plan B as well. And very important thing.
One second, Prashant. We have someone in the chat who have asked some Zoom user, hi Zoom user. Hey Prashant, since X Enabler works closely with tech business owners as mentioned in the webinar landing page, what is the biggest red flag founders should look for uh, after interviewing an outsourced tech partner? Ensure they won't just build a bloated product. It may or may not be related to this slide, but just a question. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you are outsourcing, the first thing you need to ask for any company that you outsource to, how do they handle failure? Because we keep talking about how will you handle failure yourself. But if the vendor or the partner that you are working with, if they are not resilient, when things go right, nobody asks questions. But when things go wrong, and trust me, I'm going through 3 different code reviews at the moment, and 2 of those companies probably going to lose the code to the development agency. So when things go wrong, what is the control do you have in place? So we recently did a post on LinkedIn. Actually, you should probably look at that. It only came out yesterday. So who owns the code? Who is responsible for the quality of the product and checking of the product? All right, who defines the scope? Who defines what feature should go in, should not go in, how that feature should work? Are you doing that requirement, or is that company helping you to define how that feature need to work? Who's going to take the business decision versus who need to take the technical decision? All right, are you hiring a software development company, or are you hiring a technology partner? Now the difference is, a technology partner will allow you to not only develop the product, but they will consult you what that product needs to be. And this is very, very important distinction, because if you don't have that component, then you are responsible for that part, and they will just develop whatever you say. So when things go wrong, it will be like, you said so. Like, we developed what you provided us specification, and there's no accountability of whether it fits the market or not. But if it is a consultancy, There's a lot of work that has gone into that before the product has actually been defined and went to the development, and that is very, very important. So if you are outsourcing, make sure what in-house skills you have and what you don't have, and between the agency and yourself there is no gap. If there is a gap of like, okay, you have an idea, not the specification, then you need a company who will help you turn that into the specification and then develop it, not just develop it. I hope that answers the question, but feel free to reach out later as well. Okay.
I've also dropped the link of the LinkedIn post that Prashant was talking about, just in case you guys want to check that out. Please tap on the link. I've dropped it in the chat box.
Yep. Okay. So let's go to the main question. How do you make money? So how do you get your first real customers? Not the users, customers. Now, why that distinction? So you might have a number of users and they might be free users, but none of them are actually paying. The person who is paying might not be the actual user of the platform. So going back to our example of dementia platform, the users are the carers who look after the person with dementia. But the customer or the payer is the owner of aged care. So how do I get the aged care owner to sign up a contract and buy the product? The Now the problems to the users and customer, they are both important, but they both not be the same. So for a user, a problem might be that, okay, I am facing problem to understand and manage the behavior of a person with dementia when that occurs. A problem for a customer, or which is aged care owner, is that when an incident occurs, there are a number of incident occurs in dementia ward which are much more heavier than the normal ward. All right. When an incident occurs, the time spent to manage that incident is between half a day to couple of days or more, and that time can be spent on better things. Third, the risk that it poses on compliance, on ability to actually operate the facility is very high. So now to convince the user, I need to show them the effectiveness of the strategies that are provided that will help them understand and manage the behavior to get better outcome. But what I need to provide evidence to the customer or the owner is that by using this system, the number of incidents might reduce. Number of incidents, when they occur, they won't escalate to the level. Third, it will provide an audit trail that how the evidence was created to manage that incident, that will help them to become compliant and help them reduce the risk. All right. So as you can see, the answers to and the questions, they differ from who is the buyer and who is the user. So you need to focus on both. First, who is your first customer persona? Who is the person who is actually buying your product? Have you defined that persona very clearly? All right. We always go through like the product research, which says frustrated Fred. He's in his 30s. He's doing a plumbing job. He loves doing the plumbing job. He doesn't like the paperwork, but he has to spend like at least 12 hours a week on paperwork because you need to quote, invoice, provide evidence that the work was done, deal with the insurance, accountant, all of that, and he doesn't like that. By using our solution, Fred will reduce that time to 3 hours. And that means Fred can do what Fred loves, dealing with pipes and plumbing. All right. So define the problem, the customer persona, age group, level of business that Fred works by itself. He does not have a team. He does most of the stuff himself. He's the sole business trader. So define problem to the persona to the granular level so that you can target the marketing strategy, product, everything to that particular persona. All right. Second, once you identify that, how can you reach them? Where does Fred reachable to talk about the problem. And in the previous webinar, we went into detail of that find a platform where they are happy to talk about their problem, not your solution, their problem. Because if they can't talk about their problem, your solution will never come into picture. All right. What is the first product they are buying? Are they buying the invoicing solution, CRM, or are they buying compliance solution? What are they buying? How much do you want them to pay for them to get the value, but also for your business to become profitable at certain level? So it needs to be a fair value calculated, and you might have to do A/B testing there. All right. How long do they need to try before buy? Do you need to give any free trial, or number of invoices they can generate? What is the strategy to penetrate the market, get them the taste of the product before they say, yeah, I will buy that? All right. And what is the minimum period they need to keep using before they say, yeah, I can never live without this product? All right. And how will you reward the customer loyalty? Say if Fred brings another 5 customer, will you be rewarding Fred something? Or if he remains with you for 2 years, will there be a reward or something? You need to think about those things as well. All right. So these are the techniques you can use to actually get your first customers and scale it from there. Because what works for one customer, you can then apply to all the same persona, and most likely it will work. So let's recap everything together. So scope your product, build only the MVP, cut ruthlessly, whatever is not required to sell the version 1, cut that, define the bare minimum scope that you need to build. And then don't feature overload, prioritize income over the impact. So if your product is in many cases it's an impact project, you still need to generate money. And I always love the saying that a tree can only support a vine if it is standing by itself. So if the business is not standing by itself, it cannot make the impact that it wants to. So you first need to stand tall by yourself, and then only you can do the impact, you can do the support, you can provide the goodwill that you actually want to provide back to the community. So first, stand on your leg, and then you can support others. Right. Launching without launch strategy. So see the launch, plan it alongside the development. Make sure you are prepared not only for the launch but beyond that, for the entire journey. Right. And don't experiment where it's not needed. So technology, only take risk where it is required. Wherever it is de facto, just go with the de facto choice. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, biggest businesses, if you look at Costco, Walmart, biggest companies in the world, they have the most boring business of selling groceries, and they are the biggest businesses in the world. All right. So it does not need to be groundbreaking or SpaceX or anything. You can still make plenty of money. So sometimes the opportunity sits in the most boring problem that nobody wants to solve. All right. Or nobody wants to deal with. And make sure there is a feedback loop. Monitor, measure, and improve continuously. So your version 1 is not the end game. It's a start. You have a long way to go. Most businesses, if you look at IBM or Nokia or anyone, it took them 50, 60 years to actually make an impact. So it takes long time for a business to make impact and become successful. And that's what I'm going to talk about next, the journey. So what you need to do is you need to have a 6-month detailed plan, which is your MVP launch. You need to have 1-year milestone. So after the launch, you give another 6 months for it to perform. And you have a very clearly defined milestone, what you need to achieve, because urgency is actually the best currency that is available to startups, right? Which enterprise cannot afford. So startups can move very, very fast. Use that to your advantage, but only if you use it, it's your advantage. If you can't, then you are doing same mistakes as the enterprises do. You need to have a 3-year strategy that if this thing works, where should my product go in 3 years time? All right. And then you need to have a 10-year vision, what my business need to be in 10 years time. And you keep revising that this part every quarter, this part every quarter or 6 months, and this part every year. And then you keep revising them, because there's no, like, hard and fast that, okay, this is the hard truth and nothing can change. Most successful business pivot, they are agile businesses and they keep changing. Thank you.
Okay, so now we can take up all the questions. If you have anything, guys, please, if you want to unmute yourself, you can please unmute yourself. Thank you, Akshay. Akshay is sending hearts. And if any one of you have any questions, please drop it in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, Prashant, I really enjoyed the practical advice and the real world examples you shared. The webinar was very interesting and a lot of things we learned from it. I have a question like,
Yes.
what's one startup that built an excellent MVP and then that failed because they overbuilt it? Did you face
My
anything in your
startup.
experience?
So
Not yours, actually. Any you
no,
experienced?
I'm talking about one of my startup that did that. So I gave example of the CRM versus invoice building, right? So in 2014, I built a startup called Tradicom. And the idea was exactly that the small businesses, particularly plumbers and like all the trade workers, they cannot deal with the entire CRM. They need a very simplistic system. All right. Now, around same time, actually before that, in 2010, there was another business in Australia which was trying to do that same thing. All right. But the difference between my approach and their approach was exactly what was on that slide. That business was called Invoice to Go. What they did is simply a form that you fill up with the email address and whatever service item you have. It generates a PDF of the invoice and then it emails it to the customer. That's all it did, nothing else. Versus my solution was, it had a dashboard that allowed them to look at the jobs around, route them, take photos, before and after, provide evidence, do the invoicing, everything. All right. Invoice to Go today is a close to like 50 million, $100 million company. My business is closed, not to mention, obviously. But the problem that I identified on that slide, if I have to build Tradicom again, all right, I will take the same approach. I'll only solve one very simple problem that people can pay for and then pivot into a very complex product later, rather than building a complex product that takes very long time to sell. So again, same, all the mistakes that I mentioned in this presentation, I have done that multiple times, the same mistakes. I have learned from that. The startups I do today are very different to startups that I used to do 10 years ago. So this is not a blueprint of what I know. This is the blueprint of what I have done wrong and what I have learned through this time. Thank you.
And also, like, which is a feature that you decide that should go in MVP, this should go in the version one, or so on. Like,
Whatever
how
makes money,
process?
simple. What's the easiest way to make money? Again, going back to same example, the way invoice to go charge was no subscription, no crazy pricing or anything. They were like, first 10 invoices free, and then every invoice you have to pay 10 cents. And then they just took it from there. A simple pricing strategy works. And like those are the things that actually make the business go in a very, very long run. Yeah, I got a question here on chat. If a founder has a tight 3 months timeline to build their MVP, how should they realistically split their hours between managing the product build and executing the pre-launch? Delegate, if possible. Delegate. Are you the lone founder? If you are, you need support, because in that timeline you can either build or you can do the launch. So find the people who can help you, and it might not be like employees or business partner or anything. Might be your spouse or partner, or someone who is your friend can help you put together some sort of pre-launch strategy, or they can help you with the build while you do the pre-launch strategy, or something like that. Or what you can do is because if I understand, build is your time when the most money is spent. If you have to do that, do the launch strategy before that. All right, define it when you are defining the product definition itself, and then you can do it in parallel, because then you're not doing strategy as well as operation together. And we do this in our businesses as well. What we do is we do all the revisions, all the strategy on the whiteboard before we start the build. So by the time we actually start the build, we have a very clear idea what to build and how to sell it. And then it's all about operating. So then you can outsource, like, to a social media agency saying, hey, can you run these campaigns for me? They're very well defined. You just need to execute. And then how you do the development, you can alongside like do the marketing strategy, audience building, all of that. I hope that answers question, but if you want to drill down, unmute yourself and please feel free to ask.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions anybody else want to ask? Okay, I'll ask. I have just one question.
Sure.
So what I've seen is like 90% of the founders, they usually get stuck in build, deploy, and wait sort of the loop. So what is that one thing that those 10% founders do to make it past the MVP stage and like not get
They
into that 90%?
Well, the one line answer is they sell before they build. What that means is, I'll give you an example. There was a startup that I mentored a couple of years ago. All right. And
Okay.
what they were trying to sell is basically like a scrapbook. All right.
Okay.
So what they were trying to do is build an app that uh, basically creates a scrapbook of the child for the first 5 years. So it will remind you that, hey, when the child is born, they were like, hey, make sure you take maximum photo in first week. You will always remember that. Or make sure you take the photo of the first giggle. Make sure you take the photo of the first laugh or first growl. Or make sure you note this, and it will help you, like, just preemptively give you notification that this will come next. Make sure you are prepared for that and do that. Now they wanted to wait till the app is done to do that. All right, what I suggested is you can just build an active um, campaign of notification, email notification,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
can actually sell that campaign itself. You don't need to wait for the app to be done. So if you want to prove whether your product is sellable, you probably don't need to wait until the product is done. In many cases, you can actually prove your hypothesis before even single line of code is written. Now, if you do that, you will start making money. Even if you sell it for, like, and new parents, they're always excited. So if you just join, like, moms group or pregnancy help group on Facebook, you just say, hey, I built this campaign, $50, you can buy this campaign and it will remind you for next 5 years. Everybody will buy that. All right. And
Yes,
then
right.
basically you got, like, couple of $1,000 before you even build the product, and that can help you validate the problem, get the early adopters, get your things sorted and all of that. So the people who are actually successful, they don't get attached to the idea that the product needs to be this only to solve the problem. They focus on the problem, they focus on how it will generate income, and then they will pivot into how the experience can be uplifted over time.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's actually a good idea. Whenever I'll be becoming a mother, I'll keep that in mind.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Yeah, okay. So also one more thing for all the attendees, I've dropped a link to our previous webinar as well. So if you guys want to check that out, you can check it out. And so all these links that I have attached in the chat box, we will also be sending it to you through the email, in where like we will be putting this webinar link as well. So you can check that out if you want. So then
Okay, we got one more question. What is the average amount of money or probably effort first time founders spend before they discovering that maybe their product has no market demand? Well, okay. The short answer is typically 3 to 6 months of development, depending on where you are developing. It may range between $30,000 to $300,000 before you find out that your product does not have a demand because you started building too early. When I actually joined computer engineering, the first class our HOD took, he told us this: the sooner you start writing code, the longer it takes. And it still stucks with me because in business, it's the same thing is still right. If you haven't figured out what to build and how to sell it, it will actually take longer before you start making money. So if you want to be successful, figure out how, if and how it's going to make money. Prove with some experimentation, market research, customer, talking to the customers, and all the things that you need to do, the product validation before you build the whole product. All right. And that will help you a lot. So make sure you do all those things. As Himansa mentioned, the link is there that actually talks about all these things. So that webinar talks about all the things you need to do before you start building. But one thing I want to leave you with, most of the startup we see, particularly in IT, people have this like, target achievable market, total achievable market, sizable achievable market, and what is the roadmap for next 3 years. You look at those numbers, they're always like billions and millions and things like that. And if you look at their actual plan of building, they're like, oh, we need $60,000 to do this, and we're gonna generate $10 million of revenue. Doesn't happen. I can tell you right now, doesn't happen. All right? Be realistic. If you want to open just a coffee shop, it takes $300,000 to $500,000. So if you are thinking about generating millions of dollars, it's gonna take time. It's gonna take some serious amount of money and the effort to actually get there. All right? Otherwise, everybody would be doing IT and nobody would be running cafes. So things do take time. They do have complexity. The complexity of the problem determines how much money, time, effort, and the team that is required to solve that and actually make money.
Akshay is
Yep.
saying thank you. And he has
My
mentioned
two key takeaways are don't feature, yep, and stand tall by yourself. Absolutely. Like you need to make money. Trust me, I have advised a number of startup and they prioritize impact over income, and none of them exist, unfortunately. And there were some really good startups which I wanted to succeed. Unfortunately, your income takes the priority. If you can't sustain yourself, you will not make impact.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really, like a very realistic approach that some starters and people forget that. Okay, I just wanted to ask one quick question.
Sure.
In some cases, when people think like pivoting, what is your take? There is no right or wrong answer in a way, but with
Yeah.
your experience and what's your take on our approach that okay, when do you start thinking, or when do you suggest other people when you mentor them that
It's
at some point you should start?
it okay. Short answer is, how long do you hang on a monkey bar on one bar? You need to go jump to the next hoop, right? You need to let go.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that, because sometimes you are holding on too long. As you said, there's no right answer, but you should let the data determine that, not your intuition in most of
Yeah.
the cases. So
Got it.
pivoting is not failure.
Yeah, yeah,
Pivoting is just you. It's like Thomas Edison said, I didn't find 200 like one. I didn't fail for 99 times. I found 99 ways that doesn't work. So that's
yeah,
also a progress, right? So in many cases, you need to size your experimentation, and then you need to be ruthless about that. If my data by this time says that okay, it is not working, it's time to pivot. And
yeah,
before you need to pivot, you should also already think about what the pivot might be. And what I always like to call, and every business from a grocery store to a indoor playground to IT business to a technology business, one thing I had which always kept me realistic is that exit plan. And I always put the exit plan for 3 years. So every business I do,
mm,
before I even buy it or before I even start it, I sit down and think about what is my exit plan. Now, exit plan doesn't mean that, okay, I'm going to sell this business, make money, and exit from that. Sometimes the exit plan is that, okay, if I achieve this target in 3 years' time, this is how I will scale it. The exit plan can be that, okay, if it doesn't achieve this target in 3 years, this is plan B.
All
If
right.
it doesn't, if I cannot monitor the progress in year 1 and 2, I will start closing it down in after year 2, because I don't want to keep losing money. All right.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
the one thing that will always save you is a exit plan and a clear KPI, data driven KPIs defined for the goals, and then the decisions are taken solely on data, because markets change, everything changes, and that is very very important to listen to, and not just go with the gut feeling all the time. Gut feeling is great, you need to take risk, that's what business is all about, but the data should tell you if your risk is actually working or not.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
That's really great.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Akshay. Veena, and there's one more Zoom user who says, thank you, Prashant. It
Thank
was such
you.
a
Thank you everyone for joining. And once again, sorry for yesterday's mess up. And I'm so glad
Okay.
you guys joined today.
thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank
Anybody has
you.
any other questions? Shruti says, thank you. Yeah, okay. Okay. Thank you
Bye.
so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Okay. Bye bye.